You and Clint, you buried the hatchet?
There was no hatchet to bury. You know, I made a comment. He made a comment.
At 94, Clint Eastwood isn't holding back. Known for his no-nonsense attitude, the Hollywood legend just dropped a bombshell, naming the 5 celebrities he absolutely hated. You'd be shocked to find out that some of your favorite celebrities made it to the list. Buckle up as we unveil details about the 5 celebrities Eastwood hated. Number 1. Michael Moore. Michael Moore is not your typical Hollywood star. He doesn't act in blockbuster movies or walk the red carpet every other weekend. But in his lane, Moore is one of the most powerful voices in American documentary filmmaking. His work speaks loudly, and sometimes it strikes the wrong nerve, especially when it comes to politics. Known for bold and often controversial films like Bowling for Columbine and Sicko, Moore has built a career on calling out what he sees as corruption, injustice, and hypocrisy in American institutions. And one of those targets once hit wrongly on someone he probably shouldn't have attacked: Clint Eastwood. Now let's talk about Clint Eastwood, the man, the myth, the Hollywood legend. From Dirty Harry to Gran Torino, this is the guy who made being tough look easy. A longtime actor, director, and producer, Eastwood has delivered decades of classic films, often with characters who live by their own rules and shoot first, ask questions later. But off-screen, Clint's not just quiet with cowboy boots. He's political, deeply so, and he doesn't play when it comes to his beliefs, and that, unfortunately, put him on a path of conflict with Michael Moore. These two never worked on a project together. They never collaborated, never appeared in the same movie, never even shared credits. In fact, it's safe to say that if Eastwood had any say in it, he wouldn't want to be in the same room as Moore. But life had other plans, and at least once, they did share a room, and it nearly blew up. The trouble started after Eastwood directed American Sniper in 2014. The film, starring Bradley Cooper, told the story of Navy SEAL sniper Chris Kyle, one of the most lethal snipers in U.S. military history. The movie sparked a lot of debate. Many praised it as patriotic and powerful, while others criticized it as glorifying conflict. And who was front and center among the critics? You guessed it, Michael Moore. Moore took to Twitter, now X, with a message that shook the internet. He said he was taught that snipers were cowards and that they shoot people in the back. He didn't name American Sniper directly, but everyone knew what he was talking about. Coming from a man whose entire career revolves around challenging government and military actions, Moore's words weren't surprising, but they were bold, and they didn't sit well with Eastwood. Eastwood, who's never been known to hold back, decided to clap back in a way only Clint Eastwood could. At a public event, when asked about Moore's comments, Eastwood replied with a shocking line: "Everyone kept saying I was going to unalive Michael Moore, but that's not true. It isn't a bad idea." Let that sink in. This wasn't just your typical celebrity quarrels or indirect jab. Eastwood's words were filled with threat, and he said it with that same cool, serious look he always wore in his Western movies. Moore later confirmed that Eastwood's joke wasn't the first time he'd felt unsafe around the man. He brought up a past encounter, one that happened years before at the National Board of Review Awards. According to Moore, Eastwood had approached him during the event and spoke right to his face, telling him that he will fire him with arms. Not just that, he further mentioned that he will unalive him. Moore said Eastwood even pointed his finger like an arm at him. Now let's pause right there. Most Hollywood beefs are always interesting, full of petty tweets and red carpet snubs. But this had the feel of something much darker. Moore wasn't laughing when he told this story. He made it clear that Eastwood's words were more than a joke. They felt more like a warning. And in Clint Eastwood's world, words are never just words. His image is built on the idea of being tough and, frankly, dangerous when crossed. So when he says something like that, people take notice. Moore certainly did. He said he never forgot that night and the way Eastwood delivered the threat. It stuck with him, probably as much as any review or award. This wasn't just about a disagreement over a movie. This was personal. Moore's criticism hit a nerve in Eastwood, not just because it targeted his film, but because it challenged what Eastwood stands for. Clint has always been vocal about his respect for the military, his conservative views, and his belief in strength. American Sniper wasn't just a film to him, it was a statement. And Moore's comments, whether meant to be a general thought or a pointed jab, felt like a direct attack on that belief. What followed was a full-blown cold conflict. Eastwood didn't hold back in interviews. In fact, every time he was asked about Moore, his comments stayed bitter, and let's be honest, a little scary. It was clear that if there was one person Eastwood truly could not stand, it was Michael Moore. Meanwhile, Moore didn't back down either. He called out Eastwood's behavior in interviews, saying it was dangerous for someone as influential as Clint to talk about harming people, even though it was said as a joke. He said it sent a harmful message, especially in a country already dealing with so much conflict and political tension. He never apologized for his original comments and stood by them, saying his views on snipers were shaped by personal family experiences and his beliefs about conflicts. It's safe to say these two men are complete opposites. One is a documentary filmmaker who made his name by criticizing the system. The other is a Hollywood icon who built his legacy playing tough guys who protect that same system. This conflict between them wasn't just celebrity drama. It was a clash of worldviews, pride, and strong egos. But Eastwood's reaction turned it into something far more serious than anyone expected. While Moore has faced critics before, from politicians to news anchors, he's never publicly described anyone else threatening him. And when that threat comes from Dirty Harry himself, you don't just laugh it off. Clint Eastwood wasn't acting in that moment. He wasn't reading a script. He was showing how deeply he despised Michael Moore, and he made sure the world knew it. This brings us to the next celebrity on the list. Number 2, John Wayne. John Wayne was the king of westerns long before Clint Eastwood even got his boots dusty. For decades, Wayne ruled the screen with his tall frame, deep voice, and that slow, swaggering walk. From stagecoach to true grit, he didn't just play cowboys, he was the cowboy. His roles painted the Old West perfectly. Good men with clear morals fighting for justice under wide-open skies. He believed in heroes, honor, and tradition. But then, a younger gunslinger came into town, and that man was Clint Eastwood. Clint Eastwood's path to stardom wasn't as smooth as Wayne's, but it hit hard when it landed. He got his big break playing Rowdy Yates in the TV series Rawhide, but it was the spaghetti westerns shot in Italy that made him a legend. In A Fistful of Dollars for a Few Dollars More and The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly, Eastwood introduced a new kind of cowboy. Quiet, cold, ruthless, and not interested in saving the day unless it suited him. His characters didn't talk much, and when they did, they weren't trying to be good. They were just trying to survive. And John Wayne hated every second of it. They never worked together. In fact, Eastwood once tried to offer Wayne a part in a film called The Hostiles. This could have been a moment for the two Western icons to join forces. Instead, Wayne refused the offer in the most dramatic way possible. He sent Eastwood an angry, bitter letter rejecting not just the role, but everything Eastwood's movies stood for. According to Eastwood, the letter made it clear that Wayne saw his films as a disgrace to the Western genre. The conflict began with High Plains Drifter, released in 1973. Eastwood didn't just star in it, he directed it too. The film turned the Western inside out. It was dark and dripping with vengeance. There were no good guys, the townsfolk were cowards, the sheriff was lifeless, and the stranger who rode in wasn't there to help. He was there to punish. It was the kind of film that made you uncomfortable, and that's exactly what Eastwood wanted. But John Wayne didn't see it that way. He believed Westerns should celebrate the spirit of the American. They were about bravery, self-reliance, and justice. When he saw High Plains Drifter, he didn't just dislike it, he was disgusted. He thought it betrayed everything the Western stood for. So he put pen to paper and told Eastwood exactly what he thought. In Eastwood's own words, John Wayne once wrote me a letter saying he didn't like High Plains Drifter. He said it wasn't really about the people who pioneered the West. Ouch. That wasn't just a review, it was a declaration of conflict from the genre's biggest icon. Wayne didn't stop there. He continued to take jabs at Eastwood whenever he got the chance. He reportedly told others in Hollywood that Eastwood's films were anti-hero garbage, that they lacked moral clarity, and that Clint's cowboys have no code. He couldn't understand why audiences loved these cold-hearted characters. To him, they weren't men. They were mercenaries with hats. Eastwood, for his part, didn't throw many punches back, at least not publicly, but you can feel the tension in his work. His westerns got darker, deeper, and more complex. The outlaw Josie Wales, Pale Rider, and later Unforgiven all pushed the idea that the Old West wasn't about heroes. It was about conflict, trauma, and survival. And each time he released another film like that, it felt like a quiet answer to Wayne's criticism. Behind the scenes, the dislike between the two men was no secret. They moved in the same circles but stayed far apart. Wayne refused to attend events where Eastwood was present. He told studio heads not to back Eastwood's projects. It was personal. This wasn't just about different styles, it was about what they believed movies should be. Wayne wanted legends. Eastwood wanted reality. Aside from these incidents already mentioned, There's a story that Wayne once complained to a producer after seeing the outlaw Josie Wales, saying, "What's with all the crying and blood? Cowboys don't cry. They ride on," to which someone allegedly replied, "Maybe yours don't, but Clint's do." That summed it up perfectly. Eastwood was showing the pain behind the pistol. And Wayne? He was still riding tall, blind to the dust in his eyes. Even toward the end of Wayne's life, he refused to make peace with Eastwood. When asked about Clint's success, he'd simply push it aside or shake his head. In interviews, he stayed away from using Eastwood's name, but when he did mention him, it was never with kindness. According to crew members and insiders, Wayne once said, "That guy's turning our West into a freak show." And still, Eastwood didn't bite back, not in the press anyway. He kept making his kind of westerns, knowing that each film was slowly replacing Wayne's clean image with something more honest. He didn't need to respond with words. He let his work speak. But let's be real. Eastwood never forgot that letter. He never forgot the rejection. And he definitely didn't forget the disrespect. If you look closely at some of Eastwood's characters, especially in Unforgiven, you can feel the shadow of John Wayne looming in the background, the old-school hero who doesn't fit anymore. Their conflict didn't just shape their careers, it shaped the entire genre. Eastwood hated him so much that there seems to be no hope for forgiveness. And one thing's clear, Clint Eastwood couldn't stand John Wayne's version of the West, and John Wayne couldn't stand Clint Eastwood. Next, number 3, Spike Lee. Spike Lee is a filmmaker who never stays silent. From the very start of his career, he made it clear he wasn't going to play by Hollywood's old rules. He burst onto the scene in the late 80s with She's Gotta Have It, but it was Do the Right Thing in 1989 that cemented his place as one of the most fearless voices in cinema. He tackled discrimination, inequality, and police brutality with a raw honesty that made people sit up straight. Over the years, he's given the world unforgettable films like Malcolm X, Jungle Fever, and Inside Man. When Spike speaks, people listen, and sometimes they get mad, very mad. Obviously, Clint Eastwood was one of them. Clint Eastwood and Spike Lee never worked together on any movie. In fact, they probably never shared a calm conversation in private either. They come from completely different worlds, both in style and in beliefs. While Spike uses his films to push back against injustice and amplify black voices, Clint has built a career on tough men and quiet vengeance. Clint's movies rarely stop to explain deeper social struggles, and that's exactly what triggered the storm between the two directors. The conflict kicked off in 2008 after Spike Lee aimed at two of Clint Eastwood's films, Flags of Our Fathers and Letters from Iwo Jima. Both movies were about the Battle of Iwo Jima, one of the bloodiest and most iconic battles in U.S. history. Clint directed them back-to-back, and they were praised for being powerful, emotional, and well-made. But there was one major thing missing in both films: black soldiers, and Spike Lee didn't let that slide. At the Cannes Film Festival, Spike called Clint out publicly. He said, "If you blinked, you missed the one black person that was in it. There were black Marines." He was furious that Eastwood's films didn't reflect the real history of the event. Black men had fought and passed on in Iwo Jima, yet Clint's version of events left them out completely. Spike didn't sugarcoat his words. He never does. Now, most directors would have dodged the comments or tried to explain themselves calmly, but not Clint Eastwood. When he was asked about Spike's remarks, he fired right back. His response was blunt, sharp, and honestly a little scary. A guy like that should shut his face. Soon, that line became headline news. Clint didn't just disagree, he wanted Spike silenced. No room for debate, no apology, just straight-up anger. That reaction made it clear Clint took the criticism personally and wasn't interested in discussing history or making room for a different viewpoint. He just wanted Spike to go away. And Spike Lee? He wasn't about to stay quiet. A few days later, he clapped back. He mocked Clint's response and said, "I'm not going to shut up, and no one's going to make me." He even joked that Clint sounded like an angry old man, which only added fuel to the fire. Spike made it clear he wasn't afraid of Clint's reputation or his cowboy glare. He'd said what he meant, and he wasn't taking it back. From that point on, the tension between them hung in the air. Spike continued to push for better black representation in film, while Clint carried on making his kind of movies, films with white male leads and rarely a single black voice in sight. It became more than just a one-time argument. It turned into a clear clash of values, identity, and vision for what stories Hollywood should tell. And truthfully, Eastwood's comments weren't just defensive, they were aggressive. Saying someone should shut his face wasn't a mature disagreement, it was a verbal slap meant to humiliate and silence. and it spoke volumes about how much Clint resented being challenged, especially by a black director who wasn't afraid to call out what others ignored. Aside from all of these, an insider who once worked on one of Eastwood's sets mentioned that Clint liked to surround himself with people who didn't question him. He expected silence, obedience, and respect. That's not Spike's world. Spike thrives on questions, protests, and uncomfortable truths. No wonder they couldn't stand each other. Over time, the conflict softened a bit in the public eye, but make no mistake, it never truly went away. When asked about Eastwood in later interviews, Spike didn't hold back. He called out the lack of diversity in Clint's films and stood by his belief that Hollywood still had a long way to go. He said, "Just because someone's made great films doesn't mean they get a pass on representation." Eastwood, on the other hand, never apologized. He never retracted what he said. In fact, many noticed that his later films like American Sniper and Richard Jewell continued to reflect his same narrow view of who belongs at the center of the story. That stubbornness, that refusal to change, only deepened the sense that he and Spike would never see eye to eye. And really, Clint Eastwood's reaction wasn't just about one comment. It revealed something deeper. It showed how much he hated being challenged, especially by someone who didn't fit his idea of who gets to speak up in Hollywood. Spike didn't just criticize a film, he criticized Clint's worldview, and Clint responded like a man whose pride had been shot at. Even now, if you bring up Spike Lee in conversations around Eastwood, you'll feel the chill in the air. He won't joke about it. He won't reflect. He might not even answer, because to him, Spike was the one who dared to break his bond of authority, and Clint Eastwood does not like to be questioned. This brings us to the next celebrity on the list. Number 4, Leonardo DiCaprio. He talks about nobody's fooling with anyone. Leonardo DiCaprio is one of the biggest stars of his generation. From his early days of charming teenage fans in Titanic to his Oscar-winning role in The Revenant, Leo has spent his career chasing intense, emotional, and demanding roles. He's worked with legends like Martin Scorsese, Quentin Tarantino, and Christopher Nolan. These directors are known for pushing boundaries, and Leo loves that. He's a perfectionist who thrives on doing scenes over and over until every emotion feels real. So when he teamed up with Clint Eastwood in 2011 to star in J. Edgar, it looked like a dream combo. But behind the scenes, it turned into a quiet battle of wills, one that left Eastwood angry. J. Edgar was a biographical drama about J. Edgar Hoover, the longtime director of the FBI. It was supposed to be a serious, heavy-hitting film. Leo played the lead role, pouring himself into the part as usual. He was known for his deep prep work and often requested retakes if he felt something was off, even slightly. He didn't care about the clock or the schedule, he just wanted to get it right. That's how he worked. But Clint Eastwood had a completely different approach. He's known in Hollywood for his one-take style. He doesn't believe in rehearsing a scene 20 times. He expects actors to show up ready, deliver their lines, hit their marks, and move on. He once said that if actors needed too many takes, they weren't right for the part. It's quick, it's sharp, and it's all business. Some actors love it, others can't stand it, and Leo, he definitely didn't love it. The tension reportedly started early in the shoot. DiCaprio would finish a scene and ask for another take, wanting to dig deeper into the moment. But Eastwood didn't like that. To him, asking for retakes was like questioning his authority. It meant you didn't trust his judgment. One time, when Leo requested a second take during an important scene, Clint didn't argue. He just turned and walked off set, loudly saying, "That's it, we're done for the day." Boom, just like that. No warning, no conversation, no second chances. The crew was left in shock. It wasn't a playful disagreement, it felt like a message. Don't challenge Clint Eastwood, not even if your name is Leonardo DiCaprio. While they never had a full-blown screaming match on set, the quiet conflict between them was obvious. Tom Hanks, who had worked with Eastwood before, once said, "You certainly don't want one of those Eastwood looks. He treats his actors like horses." That line wasn't meant to be funny, it was true. Clint came from the old-school belief that actors were just part of the machine. You show up, do your job, and don't complain. Leo, on the other hand, had spent his whole career being treated like a creative partner. Working with Eastwood felt like being demoted to just another tool. Sources close to the production said that Leo would quietly complain to crew members between takes, saying things like, "He won't let me explore the scene," or "I just need one more take and he won't give it to me." One person even claimed Leo told a friend that Clint made the set feel like a prison. Strong words from someone who rarely speaks badly about directors. Clint never publicly trashed Leo by name, but he made sure people knew how he felt about actors who waste time on set. In interviews after the movie wrapped, Clint said things like, "Some actors think more takes mean better acting. I say, if you don't get it on the first one, you don't understand the scene." That might sound general, but everyone knew who he was talking about. He also said, "These young guys, they want to control the whole process. They don't understand that film is about instinct, not obsession." Again, no names, but the shade was clear. Insiders say Clint was glad when the movie ended. That comment alone says everything. Eastwood didn't just dislike Leo, he clearly hated him. And if there was ever a younger actor Clint Eastwood clearly could not stand, it was Leonardo DiCaprio. And lastly, number 5, Jane Fonda. Jane Fonda talks about what she does when she's not active. Jane Fonda isn't just a Hollywood actress, she's a force of nature. From the 60s all the way, she's been in the spotlight for both her powerful acting and her passionate activism. She won 2 Academy Awards and featured in Clute and Coming Home. Aside from acting, she still found time to shake up Washington with her outspokenness on everything from the Vietnam conflict to climate change. Love her or not, you can't ignore her. And when someone that bold crosses paths with a Hollywood powerhouse like Clint Eastwood, who lives on the opposite end of the political spectrum, sparks are guaranteed. Clint Eastwood, on the other hand, has been famously conservative and believes in keeping things traditional both in life and in film. For a long time, fans wondered why Jane Fonda and Clint Eastwood had never worked together. They were 2 of the biggest names in the business, both highly respected, both commanding lead roles across multiple decades. But behind the scenes, there was a wall between them, a solid one, and Eastwood had built it himself. The chance for a collaboration came in the early 80s, when Eastwood was preparing to star in Tightrope, a dark thriller about a detective with a complicated personal life. Richard Tuggle was directing, but Eastwood's influence on the film was so strong, many said he was co-directing it. That meant he had a major say over casting, and that's exactly where Jane Fonda's name came up. At some point during pre-production, someone suggested Jane Fonda for the female lead. It made sense. She was a star. She had range. She had box office power. But the minute her name was mentioned, Eastwood reportedly shut it down without hesitation. According to director Richard Tuggle, Clint didn't give a detailed explanation. He just said, "No, I don't like her." Now that may sound casual, but coming from Clint, that was the end of the conversation. Tuggle later hinted that Eastwood's decision was more about politics than performance. He said he might have not liked her politics, which in Hollywood language means there's no way he was ever going to work with someone that vocal on the left. Jane talks about her activism. Jane Fonda's political reputation was no small thing. By the time Tightrope was in the works, she was already one of the most controversial figures in America. Her visit to North Vietnam in 1917-2 had made headlines across the globe. She had posed on an enemy anti-aircraft arm, and many in the U.S., especially veterans, never forgave her. Some called her a traitor, others called her brave. Either way, her name came with strong emotions, and Clint Eastwood was definitely on the side of the critics. Clint has always made it clear he doesn't like being told what to think. He believes in strength, service, and personal responsibility. Jane Fonda, in his eyes, probably represented everything he didn't want in a co-star: loud, liberal, and unafraid to speak against the military or the government. Her public activism wasn't something he respected, it was something he despised. Even though Jane never directly commented on the Tightrope rejection, she's never hidden how people like Eastwood treated her. She once said, "There were doors I could never walk through in Hollywood, and I knew why." It wasn't because she lacked talent. It was because certain powerful men didn't like her politics, and Clint was one of them. The deeper you dig, the clearer it becomes. Clint Eastwood didn't just dislike Jane Fonda, he couldn't stand what she stood for. In one interview, when asked about Hollywood actors getting too political, Clint rolled his eyes and said, "They should act, not preach." That might have been directed at a lot of people, but it hit hardest when you remember how outspoken Jane had always been. Even when Eastwood himself stepped into politics, speaking at the Republican National Convention and famously scolding an empty chair meant to represent President Obama, he still criticized others for being too political. That double standard showed just how personal his grudge against Fonda truly was. It wasn't about politics in general, it was about her. When you're Clint Eastwood, you don't need to shout to show who you hate. You just say, "I don't like her," and that's the end of it. Obviously, Clint Eastwood has never been the type to play nice just to keep the peace. Over the years, he's had his fair share of Hollywood enemies, from calling out Spike Lee over film criticism to threatening Michael Moore with a good old-fashioned shoot first, ask later attitude. And honestly, fans eat it up. On social media, folks call his conflicts iconic and pure Clint. It's like he walked straight out of a Western and brought the character to real life. Whether it's politics, pride, or just plain stubbornness, Eastwood doesn't care who he offends. That's part of what makes him unforgettable. He's bold, blunt, and doesn't care, no matter who's standing across from him. In the end, these celebrity conflicts don't just tell us who Clint Eastwood hates, they show us exactly who he is, sharp and fiercely independent. At 94, he's still not backing down from a fight, and somehow that only adds to the legend. Love him or hate him, one thing's for sure. When Clint Eastwood draws a line, you better not cross it. What are your best memories of Clint Eastwood, and which of these celebrity is your favorite? Feel free to leave your thoughts in the comments, and don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. Thanks for watching. See you in the next video.